There is a river inside you, not a poetic one, not a metaphor somebody made up to sound wise, a real one, a living river. It runs through your neck, your chest, your belly, your arms, your legs, down into the smallest ends of your fingers and the deepest tissues of your feet. It moves through vessels so large a surgeon can hold them in his hands, and so small that a human hair looks thick beside them. And every second that river is moving, your whole body is negotiating with life. Your brain depends on it. Your heart depends on it. Your kidneys, your eyes, your memory, your strength, your warmth, your breath, your sleep, your clarity of mind, all of it depends on how well that river moves. And what most people never stop to consider is this: every meal you eat has a conversation with that river, not in some mystical way, in a very physical way, in a measurable way, in a human physiology way. A meal can leave your blood vessels more relaxed or more strained. It can leave your blood sugar steadier or more chaotic. It can quiet inflammation or feed it. It can support the lining of your arteries or make the body work harder just to maintain balance. It can help you feel satisfied and stable for hours, or leave you chasing hunger again before the plate is cold in memory. That is not fad diet talk. That is biology. And I want to be plain with you from the very beginning because a serious subject deserves straight speech. I am not going to tell you that one dinner cleans your arteries. I am not going to tell you that a bowl of vegetables melts plaque, reverses years overnight, or cures heart disease. That is not honest. Real disease deserves real medical care. If you have chest pain, shortness of breath, fainting, severe fatigue, swelling, or any concern about your heart, blood pressure, or circulation, that belongs with your doctor. Not with a video, not with a storyteller, not with a man promising miracles from a cutting board. But here is what food truly can do. Food can shape the internal conditions in which disease either builds or struggles to build. Food can influence blood pressure, inflammation, triglycerides, insulin response, satiety, and the health of the endothelium. That thin, delicate, astonishing lining inside your blood vessels that decides all day long whether your circulation behaves with grace or strain. That is the word I want you to remember tonight, endothelium, because when most people think about arteries, they imagine pipes, dumb tubes, passive plumbing. But your blood vessels are not plumbing. They are alive. They sense. They signal. They respond. They release compounds. They tighten. They loosen. They help regulate clotting. They help regulate pressure. They help determine whether blood moves smoothly or meets resistance. And the endothelium is the tender, intelligent surface at the center of that job. When it is supported, vessels tend to relax better. Blood moves easier. Pressure is managed more gracefully. Tissues receive what they need. When it is chronically irritated by smoking, inactivity, poor sleep, persistent excess calories, high sodium in the wrong dietary pattern, repeated sugar overload, metabolic dysfunction, and years of bad trade after bad trade, the whole system becomes less elegant, less flexible, less forgiving. You may not feel that happening in the beginning. That is part of what makes it dangerous. The body is loyal. It compensates for a long time. It raises insulin. It tightens here. It pushes harder there. It stores more fat. It tolerates more inflammation than it should. It keeps going. It keeps going. It keeps going. Until one day the numbers are bad, the energy is gone, the pressure is up, the belly is heavier, the sleep is worse, the stairs feel steeper, and people say, "This came out of nowhere." But much of the time, it did not come out of nowhere. It came out of years. So tonight I want to give you a meal. One meal. Not because one meal is magic, but because one meal is understandable. One meal is repeatable. One meal can become a pattern. And patterns, over years, are what physiology remembers. The meal I want to give you is simple. A piece of oily fish, a large bed of leafy greens, beans or lentils, extra virgin olive oil, a side of berries, and a spoonful of ground flax. That is the meal. Not glamorous, not expensive by luxury standards, not difficult, but if you understand what each part is doing inside the body, it becomes far more than a plate. It becomes a strategy. So let us walk through it the way physiology sees it. First, the fish. Not just any fish, but the richer fish. Salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring, trout. The fish people have eaten for generations near cold waters and coastlines, often long before anyone could pronounce the word omega-3. Now, what does the body do with such a food? The first important thing is that oily fish supplies long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, especially EPA and DHA. Those are not decorative nutrients. They become part of cell membranes. And when cell membranes are built from better raw material, signaling in the body changes. Inflammation signaling changes. Triglyceride metabolism changes. Even the electrical stability of the heart has been studied in connection with omega-3 intake. That matters because a great many people today live in a state of low-grade physiological irritation. Not an infection, not a fever, just a constant simmer. Too much refined food, too little movement, too much body fat around the middle, too many sugary drinks, too many late nights, too little fiber, too much convenience. And the body adapts to all of it by staying slightly inflamed, slightly dysregulated, slightly overworked. The right fish does not make you immortal, but it gives the body building material associated with a calmer internal environment. And there is something else the fish does that people overlook. It is satisfying. A good piece of fish, especially when eaten with fiber-rich foods, slows the chaos that comes from meals built mostly out of refined starch and added sugar. It gives protein, which helps control appetite. It helps people stay full longer. It reduces the need to graze and snack and chase quick energy. And that matters, because every time a person escapes the cycle of spike, crash, crave, repeat, the body gets a little less battered. Now let us go to the greens. Spinach, arugula, kale, chard, bok choy, mixed leaves, the dark, mineral, bitter, living leaves many people were taught to treat like garnish. But the body does not see them as garnish. The body sees them as instruction. Leafy greens are rich in compounds that support vascular health, and one of the most interesting is dietary nitrate. Now, I know that word nitrate has frightened people because they confuse it with processed meat and chemical talk. But the nitrate that comes packaged inside a leaf is part of a different story. Inside the body, nitrate from vegetables can be converted along a pathway that helps increase nitric oxide availability. And nitric oxide is one of the quiet heroes of human physiology. It helps blood vessels relax. It supports endothelial function. It improves the ability of arteries to widen when the body needs more flow. That means less resistance, easier movement, better pressure handling. Think of it this way. Your heart can pump perfectly faithfully, but if the vessel downstream is stiff, irritated, and reluctant to open, the job becomes harder. That faithful heart has to push against resistance. Over time, resistance has consequences. Greens are one of the simplest ways to tell the body, gently and repeatedly, relax the vessels, improve the flow, support the lining. And beyond nitrates, leafy greens bring potassium, folate, antioxidants, fiber, and volume. Volume matters. When a plate is physically large because it is built on leaves and vegetables, it satisfies the eye and the stomach without delivering the same metabolic hit as a plate built on white flour, fries, and sweet sauce. Now we come to the beans or lentils. This is where many people lose interest because beans do not have a marketing department. They do not arrive in glossy packaging with words like performance, premium, and biohacked. But physiology could not care less about glossy packaging. The body cares what happens after swallowing. Beans and lentils are some of the most useful foods in the human diet for one simple reason. They are slow. They are slow to digest compared with refined carbohydrates, slow to raise blood sugar, slow to leave the stomach, slow to abandon you. They bring fiber, soluble and insoluble, and that changes the whole post-meal experience. Fiber slows absorption. It improves satiety. It supports the gut microbiome. It helps with cholesterol management. It gives intestinal bacteria material to ferment into compounds that may support metabolic and vascular health in ways people are still learning more about. A person who eats beans with a meal often has a very different next 3 hours from a person who eats a basket of white bread and a sugar-laden dressing. One gets steadier energy. The other gets entertainment followed by consequences. And here I want to say something practical. A great many symptoms people blame on aging are sometimes the downstream effect of unstable eating, mid-afternoon exhaustion, foggy thinking, constant cravings, restless hunger, a need for something sweet after every meal, irritability when meals are delayed. These things are not always fate. Sometimes they are rhythm. Sometimes they are blood sugar being whipped around by meals that deliver speed without structure. Beans restore structure. Now pour on the extra virgin olive oil, not because it is trendy, because it changes the meal in several intelligent ways at once. Extra virgin olive oil provides mostly unsaturated fat, especially monounsaturated fat, and it also carries polyphenols, plant compounds that behave less like fuel and more like biochemical participants. The better oils do not merely sit there as calories. They interact with oxidation, inflammation, and endothelial function in ways that have made them central to heart-healthy dietary patterns again and again. A lot of people still think all fat is the enemy because they were taught that decades ago. But the human body does not survive by avoiding all fat. Your cell membranes contain fat. Your hormones depend on lipid structures. Your brain is rich in fat. The real question is not whether fat exists. The real question is what kind, in what context, and replacing what. Olive oil used in place of butter-heavy sauces, deep-fried coatings, or ultra-processed dressings is not the same physiological event. And here is something important for appetite. A salad with no meaningful fat on it often feels morally virtuous and biologically unsatisfying. A person eats it, feels proud for 20 minutes, and then attacks a box of crackers at 4 o'clock. But greens with olive oil, protein, and fiber tell a different story. They slow digestion. They increase satisfaction. They help the brain register that a real meal has happened. Satiety is not a character trait. It is chemistry, stretch, hormones, and timing. That is why a physiologically smart meal beats a light meal that leaves people prowling the kitchen. Now we add garlic. A small thing, a strong smell, a humble ingredient that has outlived empires and dietary fashions alike. Garlic is interesting because it sits at the meeting point of tradition and mechanism. People trusted it long before they could explain it. Now we know it contains sulfur compounds that have been studied for effects related to vascular and metabolic health. I am not going to tell you garlic is a miracle bulb. It is not. But as part of a whole dietary pattern, it makes sense. Crushed garlic, especially when allowed to rest briefly before heating, develops compounds that appear to matter biologically. It fits beautifully with olive oil. It makes greens taste alive. It lets healthy food feel robust instead of dutiful. And taste matters more than nutrition purists like to admit, because people do not keep eating food that feels like punishment. The body benefits from what the mouth will repeat. Now the berries. This is where people often think we have wandered into decoration again. A few blueberries, some strawberries, blackberries, raspberries. What difference could that make? Quite a lot, in the long run. Deep-colored berries carry anthocyanins and other polyphenols that have drawn attention for their antioxidant and anti-inflammatory roles. But I want to explain this carefully, because the word antioxidant has been cheapened by marketing. Your body is not a rusty bicycle. You do not eat a blueberry and hear a squeak disappear, but oxidative stress is real. Tissues are constantly managing wear, reactivity, repair. When diet quality is poor, when smoking exists, when metabolic health is damaged, when sleep is bad, when excess adiposity persists, the whole system gets rougher. More friction, more insult, less elegance. Berries do not stop time. What they may do is contribute to a diet pattern that gives the body better tools for managing wear. And unlike juice, berries bring fiber with sweetness. That matters immensely. Whole fruit is not the same event as sweet liquid. Liquid sugar is fast. It bypasses chewing, fills the bloodstream quickly, and does not satisfy in proportion to its energy. Whole fruit slows things down. It asks for chewing. It arrives in structure. The sugar is accompanied by fiber, water, and phytochemicals. That is not a small difference. That is the difference between a message the body can manage and a hit the body must scramble to contain. And now the final piece, ground flax. Quiet food, easy to ignore, extremely useful. Ground flax gives fiber and plant omega-3 in one small spoonful. It changes texture, adds almost no burden, and supports the slow-release architecture of the entire meal. Meta-analysis data suggest flaxseed consumption may lower blood pressure modestly, which is exactly the kind of effect people tend to underrate because it is not dramatic enough for marketing, even though small changes repeated across years matter. PubMed. That is the problem with modern attention. It only respects the dramatic. The body is built by the modest. A spoonful every day is modest. A better oil every day is modest. A real plate of greens every day is modest. Beans several times a week are modest. Fish a few times a week is modest. But modest things become architecture. Now put it together and look at the whole meal as physiology sees it. You sit down and eat a piece of salmon, sardines, or trout. Beside it, a huge bed of greens dressed with olive oil, garlic, and lemon. A serving of lentils or beans. A spoon of ground flax, berries on the side. What happens? Protein and fat from the fish slow the meal. Fiber from the beans, greens, berries, and flax slows the meal further. The volume of the vegetables stretches the stomach and helps send satiety signals upward. The gut begins releasing hormones that tell the brain nourishment is on the way. Blood sugar rises, but not like a flare shot into the sky. Insulin has a job to do, but not a crisis to manage. The endothelium receives compounds associated with better function instead of a chemical ambush. Triglyceride burden is not amplified by a dessert-like meal pretending to be lunch. The nervous system is not shoved into a post-meal slump. Hunger does not return in 45 angry minutes. That is what I mean when I say a meal has a conversation with your blood. And now I must tell you what ruins this conversation. Sugar dressed as health. Refined starch dressed as convenience. Calories that arrive stripped of fiber, stripped of resistance, stripped of anything that slows them down. You see it everywhere. Granola that is candy in a paper disguise. Yogurt with more added sugar than a sensible dessert. Smoothies the size of flower vases. Juices that sound like orchards and hit the bloodstream like syrup. Salad dressings that turn leaves into dessert. Protein bars that are just compressed sweets with a gym membership. And the problem with those foods is not that they are evil. The problem is that they are easy to eat quickly, hard to stop eating, and often physiologically loud. They spike fast. They satisfy poorly. They invite repetition. They train appetite toward intensity. And once a person lives inside that pattern long enough, normal food starts to seem dull. Beans seem boring. Fish seems plain. Greens seem like chores. Berries seem too tart. The tongue gets trained upward while the body gets dragged downward. That is one of the quiet tragedies of modern eating. People lose the ability to enjoy food that actually loves them back. Now let me say something else because honesty matters. This meal works best in a life that is not fighting against it from every other angle. You cannot out-salad cigarettes. You cannot out-olive oil chronic sleep deprivation forever. You cannot drown high stress in berries. You cannot ask flaxseed to negotiate with 5 hours a night, no walking, and daily drive-through food as if everybody is bargaining on equal terms. The body is one system. Sleep affects insulin sensitivity. Stress affects appetite. Muscle mass affects glucose disposal. Movement affects blood pressure and endothelial function. Smoking damages vessels. Alcohol can quietly distort appetite and triglycerides. Body fat around the abdomen changes inflammatory signaling. So if you want the truth, here it is. The best meal for blood flow is still only one part of the best life for blood flow. But it is an excellent part, and it is one you can start with tonight. Because a meal is immediate. A meal is concrete. A meal does not require a new personality. It requires a grocery list, and I think that is why simple meals remain so powerful. They cut through self-deception. A person can argue philosophy all day, but dinner tells the truth. Dinner reveals what kind of future a person is rehearsing, a future of repeated spikes and crashes, or a future of steadier chemistry, a future of appetite running the house, or a future of appetite being well led, a future of daily friction in the vessels, or a future in which the vessels are given again and again what they need to behave better. That is why I prefer talking about meals instead of supplements. Supplements tempt people to think health can be added on top of an unchanged life. But food is less forgiving than that. Food exposes pattern. It asks for replacement, not decoration. Not, how can I sprinkle wellness dust on bad habits? But, what goes on the plate instead of what was there before? Instead of fries, beans. Instead of white bread and sweet dressing, greens and olive oil. Instead of dessert yogurt, plain yogurt with berries if you want it elsewhere in the day. Instead of juice, whole fruit. Instead of processed meat every day, fish sometimes and legumes often. Instead of a snack built to disappear, a meal built to last. That is where physiology begins to shift, not in slogans, in substitutions. And let me talk for a moment to the person who says, "This sounds healthy, but will it actually keep me full?" That depends on whether you build the whole plate or only admire parts of it. A few leaves alone will not keep you full. A token piece of fish with no fiber probably will not either. But protein plus fiber plus unsaturated fat plus volume is one of the most dependable satiety combinations in all of nutrition. There is a reason the most sensible dietary patterns in the world keep arriving at the same families of foods. Not because of ideology, because physiology keeps rewarding them. Vegetables, beans, fish, whole foods, unsaturated fats, minimal added sugar, minimal ultra-processing. This is not glamorous enough to dominate the internet for long because it does not produce the thrill of extremism. It does not say carbs are poison, or fat is poison, or fruit is forbidden, or one ancestral tribe discovered immortality in a nut paste. It is more boring than that. And because it is more boring, it is more believable. It is the kind of eating pattern major heart health institutions keep pointing back to. More vegetables and fruits, more whole foods, more fish and plant proteins, more unsaturated fats like olive oil, less added sugar, less ultra-processed food, less saturated fat in excess, and better overall dietary patterns rather than obsession over a single magic item: American Heart Association, Mayo Clinic, Harvard Health. And I want you to notice something about that list. It is not punishment. A salmon fillet with lemon and cracked pepper is not punishment. Sardines with herbs and olive oil are not punishment. A warm bowl of lentils with garlic is not punishment. Greens dressed properly are not punishment. Berries are not punishment. What has happened is that people have been taught to mistake stimulation for pleasure. But stable energy is a pleasure. Clearer thinking is a pleasure. Not needing a nap after lunch is a pleasure. Feeling light instead of inflamed is a pleasure. Eating a meal and being free from it for hours is a pleasure. A better blood pressure reading is a pleasure. A body that cooperates is a pleasure. That is grown-up pleasure, quiet pleasure, durable pleasure. And that is what this meal is built for. So if you wanted my plain answer to the question, what is the best meal for healthy blood flow according to physiology, this would be it. A large plate of leafy greens, a serving of beans or lentils, a portion of oily fish, extra virgin olive oil, garlic, a side of berries, ground flax. You could dress the greens with olive oil, crushed garlic, lemon, and a little pepper. You could lay the fish on top. You could serve the beans warm on the side. You could scatter flax over the greens or stir it into yogurt later. You could eat the berries as dessert instead of chasing something sugary and disappointing. And if you did that often, not once for virtue, but often for pattern, your body would understand the message, not a loud message, a repeated one. Relax. Steady. Repair what you can. Do not inflame what need not be inflamed. Do not spike what need not be spiked. Do not burden what is already carrying enough. That is what wise eating sounds like inside the body. And maybe that is the deepest point of all. Most people are waiting to feel sick before they respect physiology. They wait for the numbers. They wait for the diagnosis. They wait for the warning. They wait for the fatigue that no longer lifts. They wait for the belt not to fit. They wait for the stairs to say what the body had been whispering for years. But physiology is speaking now, not later. Now. It is speaking in the afternoon crash, in the waistband, in the cravings, in the restless hunger, in the rising pressure, in the sleep that does not refresh, in the labs that edge the wrong way each year, in the breath that shortens sooner, in the inflammation disguised as just getting older. The body is speaking now, and one of the kindest answers you can give it is not dramatic at all. Not a cleanse, not a detox, not a promise in a bottle, not an extreme. Just a physiologically intelligent plate repeated often enough that the body stops having to fight so hard to protect you from your own habits. So the next time you eat, remember this. You are not only feeding hunger, you are feeding blood flow, you are feeding vessel tone, you are feeding hormone response, you are feeding the endothelium, you are feeding the rhythm by which energy enters and leaves your day. You are feeding, meal by meal, the conditions in which your future body will have to live. And if you want to be kind to that future body, make the meal simple. Fish, greens, beans, olive oil, garlic, berries, flax. Nothing magical, nothing theatrical, just food that makes physiological sense. And in an age where most things are sold too loudly and believed too quickly, that may be exactly why it is worth trusting.